someone told my grandmother in Auschwitz that she'd have a grandson who's a national hero of the state of Israel, she wouldn't know how to digest that information, you know what I mean? As far as I'm concerned, I'm seeing miracles happen every day. The Iron Dome, and everyone's like, oh yeah, the Iron Dome, as if that's normal. A device that can detonate rockets midair? I mean, that's insane. Dr. Daniel Gold, who invented it, told me personally, he's like, everyone thought it was impossible. The military thought it was impossible, the government thought it was impossible, and he built it.
This is a Visegrad 24 series about the Israel-Hamas war.
My name is Stefan Tompson. I'm here with Visegrad 24. We're on the ground in Israel to bring you the reality of what's happening on the ground. We're interviewing influencers, professors, journalists, Nova survivors, families of hostages, former hostages, Holocaust survivors, and also tech columnist Hillel Fuld. Hillel, good to have you here, man.
Fantastic to meet you. Been a fan for a long time, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Hillel, I want to start with really the most difficult thing of all. You, aside from being famous yourself, you had a brother who was tragically killed. Could you tell me the story behind that and how that's impacted your life and your work?
So I feel like we're close enough for me to correct you and say, no, he wasn't killed. He was murdered.
Sure.
Difference. He wasn't killed in a car accident.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah, but it's semantics, but people, we see it in the press. It's like, oh, a rocket landed. It landed by itself, like it took off by itself, like, Yeah. Anyway, so, we're American from New York, and my brother Ari picked up in the middle of his life and came to Israel. Hardcore Zionist, and I'm talking like before Zionism was a dirty word, right? And we just grew up with pure love for the land of Israel. And he came here and he volunteered for the military. Mm-hmm. He climbed up the ranks in the military. He then started to volunteer for reserve duty, climbed up the ranks there too. And when he got his exemption papers, because you're basically finished with reserves when you're at the age of 40. So he got his papers and he just ripped them up and he continued to volunteer. He was a warrior. In addition to that, he was just a big dude. He was a black belt in karate. He was, 4 kids, just really, and he was a very outspoken Israel advocate, millions and millions of followers. And he did weekly videos, etc. And he was shopping for his family the day before Yom Kippur 5 years ago. And a Palestinian kid, 16-year-old kid, came from behind, stabbed him in his main artery in his neck, which basically at that point, medically, he was gone. Like he had no blood in his veins. Somehow, miraculously, he ran after this terrorist who 5 minutes before had eaten a falafel there at that same junction. The woman who served him had a falafel stand there, and she was his next victim. He came after her with a knife, and just before he was about to stab this woman, Ari shot him. He didn't kill him, but he basically saved this woman in his last breath. Since then, the woman whose name is Hillel has become part of the family, and Ari received an award from the state of Israel as a national hero. So, I say all the time that if someone told my grandmother in Auschwitz that she'd have a grandson who's a national hero of the state of Israel, she'd be like, she wouldn't know how to digest that information, you know what I mean? So yeah, I mean, that causes deep trauma in a family. But, the legacy that he left is just astounding. I mean, the stories now, 5 years later, are still pouring into my inbox. Amazing stories. And, we'll talk about it, but October 8th, the day after, I just started channeling him. I basically shut down my business and I just started jumping into Israel advocacy. And I very strongly feel like I'm channeling my brother. And I also strongly feel that everything I've done until now as a tech guy, I've done to bring me to this moment. So I'm all in on Israel now. And, it's been a ride.
You grew up in the US and you moved here when you were 15. You had a culture shock. And you told me that Israel is a very different country when you arrived here 30 odd years ago. Tell me about the transformation of Israel over those 30 years.
Oh, it's literally day and night. I mean, 30 years ago, no joke, you could not get deodorant in this country. Like people would have to import deodorant. I'm not kidding. It was a third world country. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was a third world country. And I come from New York, the capital of everything, right?
Yeah.
But now 30 years later, I'll say it like this. People used to think, and it's still a common misconception today, that if you come to Israel, you have to lower your quality of life. Like by definition, materialistically, you have to lower your quality of life. And that was pretty accurate 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. Today, I mean, you're here for a couple of weeks. Do you feel like you're lowering this is paradise. We're in paradise here. This place is like, really. So today when I talk to my American friends or my European friends and they're there, and I say to them, like, what has to happen for you to come home, right? I mean, we got anti-Semites in Congress. We got Kanye West and Kyrie Irving and, Jews being beaten in the streets. it's Germany all over again. And what are you waiting for, And then, then they say...
The difference being, of course, that this time around, you actually have a state to go to.
I like to say the only difference between Germany and 1940s to 2024 is El.com. That's it, right? You get on a plane. But, and then they say to me, no, but I have such a good life. I'm like, dude, come to Israel, have a better life. Look at this. Open this window. It's like, it's paradise, So I feel very blessed every day to be living in this unbelievable country. And then, of course, there's the side of tech, which,
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. And it's interesting because there's a parallel to what you're saying. 30 years ago, Poland, which just came out of communism, there was nothing. I look at the skyline of Tel Aviv. It's a building site. It's incredible to witness. And Warsaw, where I live and where Visegrad is based, is also, there is a transforming skyline. There's an excitement. There's a vibrancy and optimism. A lot of what you're saying, a lot of what we talked about briefly before we started this interview, really resonates with me. And this sense of, I think the main sense that I have, before I let you sort of continue, is I have a sense that here and in Central and Eastern Europe, in the post-communist world, which has had this 30 years of growth, Gen Z and millennials are going to be wealthier than their parents and grandparents. And that is a fundamental difference between us and the West. In the sense of, in London, in New York, in Berlin, in Paris, in the Western European world, there is a sense of, I can't get on the property ladder. This is what I hear from my friends. I can't get on the property ladder. The system's broken. It doesn't work. Whereas I'm in a city, and I'm hearing it resonates. What you're saying really resonates with me. I'm in a city where I feel that everything's possible. We're in building mode. This is startup nation, right? So tell me more.
I got to tell you, as an observant Jew, to me, what's going on in the world of tech in Israel is biblical. It really, it's nothing short of miraculous. It really, you're talking about a country people sometimes forget. You're talking about a country smaller than New Jersey, in the worst neighborhood on earth, right? The most unstable region on planet Earth is the Middle East, right? And so we have every excuse to just sit back and be like, we need to survive, forget innovation, right? And yet, there are a lot of ways one can look at a tech ecosystem to kind of quantify its success. Yeah. You could look at capital, right? You could look at how much capital's being invested in an ecosystem. And so just to give you some context, in 2020, $11 billion were invested in Israeli startups. $11 billion in a country smaller than New Jersey is astounding. It's absolutely insane. That's 2020. In 2021, we went from 11 billion to 26 billion in 1 year. So the numbers are off the charts, right? And the quality of that capital may be even more important. Every top tier VC in Silicon Valley has set up shop here with almost no exceptions. You have that. And then you have, the actual success, right? At the end of the day, public companies, private companies. On Wall Street, the country with the most companies on Wall Street is the United States. Mm-hmm. After that, China. So you got a country with 350 million people. You got a country with 1.5 billion people. And number 3, Israel, 9 million people. It's like that makes no sense, And that's public companies. Private companies, I think last I heard, Israel has 1/10 of the entire world's unicorns, billion-dollar private companies. The entire world, Israel has 1/10 of them, which is just crazy, And then you look at the multinationals, the Googles, they're all here. They're all here. They're all, not only are they here, by the way. You're an iPhone user? Yeah. When you unlock your iPhone, Face ID, that was developed here. People don't know it, but Apple acquired PrimeSense that invented Face ID, and every single tech company. And then you have the creativity, and you have the impact. To me, that's the punchline. Israel is using tech to make the world a better place in a very real way. Whether it's mental health, cancer research, etc. So it's biblical. It's miraculous what's going on here.
How do you go from third world country 30 years ago to this? How did that happen?
I'm going to get biblical on you for a second. Is that okay?
Shit.
All right. So actually in last week's Torah portion, we read a Torah portion every week. And last week's Torah portion talks about the Jews, the Israelites. They weren't called Jews yet. Israelites in ancient Egypt. And there's a very strange verse that, I don't know, it's not that I didn't understand it all my life, but I didn't really comprehend how it's possible. And this is what it says. The Torah says this, not commentary, the Torah itself. It says that, I'll say the Hebrew verse first. It says, V'cha'asher ya'anu oto ken yirbe v'chen yifrotz. What does that mean? V'cha'asher ya'anu oto, the more the Egyptians persecuted the Jews, in Egypt we were slaves. The more they persecuted us, the more we multiplied, the stronger we got, the more we flourished. And it's like, well, you would think if someone's being persecuted, they wouldn't be flourishing. But that's the nature of the Jewish people. We strengthen under pressure. And so, there is, I think, last I checked, at least I wrote an article about this many years ago, the correlation between terror in Israel and innovation. The more they terrorize us, the more we innovate, which again is counterintuitive, you would think, but it's the truth. And so that's the nature of the Jewish people. We're home, and we now have this energy that we previously used to survive, and now we're using to change the world. And it is remarkable to see because it keeps growing, even in the war, by the way. Even in the war. I mean, war's instability. I mean, you see Israeli tech delivering and then some. It's wild.
What's your sense of the coming years for the ecosystem? What's your sense of, and not just the ecosystem, the tech ecosystem, but also the state of Israel? Obviously, you're in a very difficult situation right now. There's a massive sense of instability. Many of the conversations I've had, there's been a very deep concern about Hezbollah, about a bigger war coming, about Iran, of course. I mean, you have this nexus of enemies. You're in this bad neighborhood. And yet, I sense you're an optimistic person. So I want to get your sense of what's coming here next.
Again, got to go back in history. We got to go back in history. You can't look. You have to look at it in a historical perspective, right? So, back literally in the days of the Bible, right? We talked about ancient Egypt. In ancient Egypt, God performed these 10 plagues. I mean, this was nature bending things. This was supernatural. Sure. And you would think that the Israelites in Egypt saw these 10 plagues. They're like, okay, God is on our side. Let's get the heck out of here and go to the land of Israel like he's telling us to do. But people don't know this, but only 20% of the Jews left Egypt. 80% stayed back. How could that even be? How's that possible? What was their narrative? What did they tell themselves? They told themselves, I'm Egyptian. I was born here. My parents were born here. My grandparents were born here. I got a roof over my head. I'm not going to go to what's this land of milk and honey thing? Leave me alone. I'm staying here, right? Because they weren't able to see the miracles that were right in front of their eyes, right? And that's, again, the nature of the Jewish people. We see it throughout our history. That's what's happening right now. This war, as painful and as horrible, and I'm not belittling that, as far as I'm concerned, I'm seeing miracles happen every day, every single day. I mean, just think about the fact that tens of thousands of rockets, that each one of those rockets has the ability to kill, tens of people, has landed in Israel in empty spaces. Where are these empty spaces? This is a country, it's a little speck on the map, and they're just landing in empty space, and everyone's like, yeah, landed in empty spaces, if that's normal. That's a miracle. That's unbelievable. There's tens of thousands that should land in empty spaces. And then you talk about the Iron Dome, and everyone's like, oh yeah, the Iron Dome, as if that's normal. A device that can detonate rockets midair? I mean, that's insane. Dr. Daniel Gold, who invented it, told me personally, he's like, everyone thought it was impossible. The military thought it was impossible. The government thought it was impossible, and he built it. And so everything that's happening in this war, I'm going to say something a little bit controversial now. Yeah. But even October 7th, as horribly devastating and painful as it was, we have to take a step back. And if we take a step back and you think that if 3,000 terrorists marched into a country smaller than New Jersey with 8.5 hours of free hand and unlimited access to automatic weapons, if you look at this objectively and ask yourself, how many people would you have expected to be killed that day? I would say 50,000.
Yeah.
I would say 50,000. Half of this country should have been wiped out. Now, again, I want to emphasize, I'm not saying that, God did October 7th and thank God he did it. That's God forbid.
Of course.
Had these Hamas, whatever you want to call them, not done the atrocities that they did, they would have taken over Israel. So, as painful and horrible as it was,
yeah,
I have to, for my own sanity, say, wow, it could have been so much worse, And so that's really what I see throughout this war. And that's why I know that we will come out of this stronger, because God didn't bring us this far to just let us, And that, it's kind of, the analogy that I like to tell myself is the splitting of the sea. After God did all those miracles, the Israelites reached the sea. Yeah. The Egyptians are coming behind them. They have water in front of them. They're stuck. So they started to complain to God. What did you do to us? Why? And I'm like, are you guys nuts? God did all these, to bring you here to drown? Of course he's going to split the sea, So I'm looking at it right now, and it's really quite parallel. That's how I see it anyway. You got the Western world breathing down our necks, coming up behind us, right? And you have this scary sea, which, you can describe, I describe as the breakup between us and America. I think that our dependency on America is horrible. It's horrible. Now, you can't just break up with America, because then we got a Black Sea and it's terrifying, right? But we got to make a move. And, them stopping us from defending ourselves is just... So anyway, the bottom line, to answer your question, I have no doubt whatsoever that we will come out of this stronger in every possible way. I mean, technologically, I mean, economically, I mean, militarily, I mean, socially, I mean, diplomatically. We're going to come out stronger because we always do. But, it's rough. It's a very dark time now.
You grew up in the US. You arrived here. You said it was a third world country. Is Israel part of the West?
Yeah, it's a good question. First of all, you asked me, you said I grew up. My wife says I never grew up, so I don't know. But, that's a good question. How do you define the West? Are we talking geographically? Are we talking culturally? Are we talking socially? Are we talking, obviously from a materialistic perspective, technologically, obviously we're part of the West, right? I mean, we're a liberal democracy. Obviously, we're part of the West. Only democracy in the Middle East. Only country in the Middle East that has diversity and has, acceptance of whatever, LGBTQ, and, So from that perspective, of course, we're on the West. But, I mean, geographically, it's the Middle East, So I guess that depends on your definition of the West.
To me, the reason I ask the question as well is because I look at it from a values perspective. And from a civilizational perspective, I definitely think Israel is part of the West. There is no Christendom without Judaism. The values that have shaped the West have come from Judaism, and they've come from Christendom. To me, the conflict is very much part of the battle of ideas that we have in the West. And it's inextricably linked. And I'm very disappointed by how few people have been standing up, especially given the mass protests that we're seeing across the West in favor of Palestine, if not openly in favor of Hamas, and certainly openly in favor of the Houthis. I mean, it's wild. So this is what I'm getting at is. So tell me about this breakup with America that you would like to see.
It's a fantasy, right? Because obviously we depend on them militarily and economically, and they support us. And I don't know what we would do, without American funding to fund the F-35s and the Iron Dome. Right? Every one of those Iron Domes is like, I don't know, $20,000 to $50,000 each one. We've fired tens of thousands. It's big money, So it's not like we could just say, okay, let's break up with them, no problem. We are dependent on them.
Why do you want to break up with them?
At the end of the day, Israel, throughout the Jewish people, throughout our history, we were always at the mercy of someone else. Do this, don't do this, go to the gas chambers, Today we're home. And we need to defend ourselves because no one else will. We've seen it, with all due respect to America. And by the way, I don't say that with sarcasm. I have a tremendous amount of gratitude to America. I grew up there and they were great to my family, right? But we know when push comes to shove, they didn't let Jews in the Holocaust, and so...
they didn't.
Right. So, I thank Biden for the support that he's given us, and I hope it continues. But when Biden comes to the war cabinet of Israel and says, ceasefire, when after October 7th happened, and we are 100% defending ourselves and doing an extraordinary amount to minimize civilian deaths. In fact, one might say we've done too much because we're risking our own soldiers. Otherwise, irony of it all, right? We're committing genocide. If we were committing genocide, there wouldn't be one dead Israeli soldier. We'd drop a bomb from the air, we'd be done. Flatten Gaza, right? But we don't do that because we're not committing genocide. So, the bottom line is I think that Israel has to somehow gain its independence in that it can make the decisions that is best for its own people and its own country and not be dependent. Why are we playing a game with Hezbollah? They're fighting, we're firing, like, what is that? Let's wipe them out. What are we playing around for? Well, America doesn't let us open war with Hezbollah. We got to get rid of them, but America won't let us, right? So it's a little bit of an abusive relationship. I think we have to break up. I don't know what that means, and I don't know how it's going to work. And again, that's why I say it's a fantasy. It's not something that's practical tomorrow. But ideologically, ideally, to me, a world in which Israel stands alone, not in a negative way, in a positive way. We have our allies, and that relationship manifests in different ways. But for America to dictate what we need to do after we were massacred and raped and butchered the way we were is preposterous, and it's really, I don't want to use too strong language, but it's really pathetic. It really is pathetic that they have the audacity to tell Israel what to do after that. 20, how many 9/11s, the equivalent, right, per cap? No one told America what to do after 9/11, What are you coming and telling us what to do? Look what they did.
Do you also feel that there is the Western world? I know that it's a broad concept, but I'm talking about sort of European countries and America and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, broadly speaking. They don't understand the position that Israel is in, because Israelis refer to this region of the world as their neighborhood, which is it's an interesting word. And I've heard a lot of people say, we're in a tough neighborhood, we're in a difficult neighborhood. Look, a Frenchman who's surrounded by Germany, by Spain, by Belgium, he's not surrounded by Egypt, Syria, Lebanon. Is there a deep sort of misunderstanding
100%.
Between these two worlds?
100%. I think the most fundamental mistake that we're making, we as in the Western world are making with this war, is that we are taking our values and we're applying them to radical Islam, an ideology that does not share those values. So, let's say a core value of ours is you treat someone with dignity and respect, they'll treat you with dignity and respect. That is just a core fundamental value of the West. That's not how radical Islam thinks. They don't think that. You could treat me with all the respect in the world. You're an infidel, therefore I'm going to behead you, right? That's how they think. And so we need to stop applying our values to them. It just doesn't work. It's not copy-paste.
How many people in neighboring countries do you think are actual radical Islamists? Because this is the crux of the question. Everyone in the West agree, well, not everyone, unfortunately, but most people in the West agree that Hamas is a fundamentalist Islamist terrorist organization, and that October 7th was terrible. And they will say, well, I'm not pro-Hamas, I'm pro-Palestine, I want the dignity of the Palestinian people, I want them to have a state, and Israel is mistreating these poor individuals, and they've created an apartheid state. You're making it sound like everyone around you is a radical Islamist.
So clearly that's not the case. But if I may push back on the premise of your question, does it matter? And let me tell you why I'm saying that. How many innocent people died in Germany in World War II? Do you know?
Millions.
How come no one asked then?
But in a sense, they weren't innocent. In a sense, they weren't innocent.
Thank you.
Because
they elected
Hitler, and then there was a silent majority. And in fact, every single German family, as a German historian who did a study, every single German family benefited in some way or another from Nazi Germany and their colonial, imperialist, whatever you want to call it, mission and occupation of Europe. I mean, there were wagons of goods coming back from occupied Europe, of furs, of gold rings, of jewelry, of art, of cultural heritage being brought back. There's a huge wealth that was redistributed to the people. There was looting, pillaging, etc., etc., etc. In that sense, when as a Pole, our country was massively destroyed. Our capital city was razed to the ground. It was flattened. Our infrastructure was decimated. It took 3 decades to reach the population that we had before the war.
But that's the thing. I think everything you just said, literally, word for word, take everything you just said and put the word Hamas instead of Nazi Germany, and you have a copy-paste. We know there are polls. 80% of the Palestinians support October 7th. 80%. They elected Hamas. 2005. Here's the thing, right? The anti-Israel crowd simply doesn't care about history. They don't care about facts. Let's talk facts. 2005, Israel removed every Jew from Gaza, including, people don't know this, we literally dug our dead up from cemeteries in Gaza because we knew what Hamas would do if we leave our dead there. So we literally removed every single Jew from Gaza, including dead, right? 2005, no blockade, no fence, no nothing. They could have built Singapore. 2006, they elected Hamas. Then the blockade came. People like to forget that little detail, right? So we're talking about a nation that is heavily indoctrinated. I posted a video this morning of, the innocent Palestinians on October 7th. They were very, much a part of the attack. And so, of course, there are innocent people. Of course there are. But there are innocent people in every war, and this war was forced upon us. So we try what we can to minimize civilian deaths, but we also are not kidding ourselves that the vast majority of Gazans are innocent. They're not, and they declare it proudly. In fact, the irony, there's so much irony to this war, but just one example is the same people that say that the Palestinians deserve a state of their own are the same people who say they're not to be held accountable for their actions and their words. It's like their charter says, let's kill every Jew. And the pro-Palestinians are like...
The updated charter is softer than that.
Oh, really? They updated it?
They updated it.
Let's talk about the Hamas, right? I'm saying, the bottom line is the PLO, Yasser Arafat basically founded the PLO to get rid of Israel. That's their agenda, right? And so the same people in the West that are saying they deserve a state as if, they're an accountable, adult nation are the same people who say they don't mean it when they say they want to kill all the Jews. So, make up your mind. Are they held accountable? Are they adults? Or are they little kids throwing a fit? If they're little kids throwing a fit and they're not going to be held accountable, they don't deserve a state. If they deserve a state, you need to hold them accountable for the things that they do. They elected Hamas. So you're right, there are innocent people in Gaza, but I don't think it's a relevant, question. I think, there's what's the Egyptian lady, Bridget Gabriel? Yeah, Bridget. She has that famous, panel where a Muslim woman gets up in the crowd and says, not all Muslims are terrorists. And she says, of course not. But according to most studies, 15 to 20% of the Muslim world is fundamentalist. So 15 to 20% of billions, we're talking about 300 million people dedicated to the destruction of the Western world. 300 million people. So the vast majority, the 800 million or the 900 million, that they're silent, they're irrelevant. They're irrelevant. Speak up. They're irrelevant because they're not doing anything about it. So the ones that matter are the 300 million people. So I don't really think about how many innocent people, because that's not relevant. We need to do what we need to do. And any country would do a lot more than Israel's doing. They'd probably, just think what would happen if America was attacked that way, right? So, yeah, there are tragically innocent people who die. The numbers are clearly ridiculously inflated by Hamas and the world, of course. Oh, yeah, a terrorist organization is going to tell me how many people died. Let's just believe them. Are you kidding me right now? In fact, forget philosophy. Let's say you want to believe a terrorist organization. No problem. Let's believe Hamas. 25,000 people or whatever it's up to now. So just tell me, Hamas, how many terrorists did Israel kill? 0. You look at their counts, 0. So Israel killed 0 terrorists. Clearly, that's ridiculous. But the world just eats it up. So, I know what Israel, the lengths that Israel goes to minimize civilian, I know that. So I don't know that the numbers that we're all hearing from Hamas about the dead, 10,000 dead women and children, that's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It's based on nothing. So, it's not something that concerns me. What concerns me right now is the existential threat to the state of Israel. That's what I'm focused on. Tragically, people die in war.
How do you go from being a tech columnist focused on the startup world, VC investments, to Hillel Fuld, activist, public advocacy person, very vocal voice? Why do you care so much? And what do you care about?
So, I said over the years many times that it's true that tech is my vehicle, but the underlying, the engine of it all was always Israel. It was always Israel. I was promoting Israel through tech, but really the deep love is for Israel. Where does it come from? I mean, I grew up with Zionism in my house. Obviously, my grandparents came from Germany and Auschwitz, and so, state of Israel was always something that was, ingrained in me from age 0, basically. Yeah. But even if it wasn't, I think that you got to be blind to not look at the geopolitical situation and just how important Israel is for the Jews. I wrote something recently. I don't know. I might have heard it somewhere. I don't even know who said it, but it's that anti-Semitism doesn't exist because of the state of Israel. The state of Israel must exist because of anti-Semitism, right? It's not that people hate us because of Israel, because before Israel, they hated us. The reason we need Israel, let alone the biblical connection, the reason we need Israel today is because look what's going on around the world. Where are we going to go, right? So, I think that the Jewish people, for the first time in our history, are able to, number one, defend ourselves, right? Which is, something that Jews dreamt of throughout our history. Think about all the persecution. Someone told me that we were exiled from countries throughout our history, on average, every 14 years. It's unbelievable. Every country exiled us, and we were just at the mercy of whoever. So finally we can defend ourselves, and finally we have our home, and that's really what it comes down to. People love to ignore the Jewish connection to the land of Israel. There was never a day in history without a Jew in Israel. Never. Yes, we were exiled, but I don't need to tell you this. Just tell me, whoever's watching, when was the Arab-Palestinian state established, right? We occupied an Arab-Palestinian state? Great. I'm going to buy that narrative. Just tell me when the state was established. Just tell me who the prime minister was. Tell me what the national anthem was. It's a fabrication, and the whole world just eats it up. We're occupying an Arab-Palestinian state. Never existed in history. So, let's talk facts, and people just ignore facts today.
One of the really interesting things about this fabrication that you talk of is the role that the KGB and the Soviet Union played in this, where we have a very deep involvement of the Kremlin and the intelligence services of the Soviet Union in creating it for a variety of reasons. And this disinformation playbook that was played out, I mean, the Russians have mastered the art of disinformation and misinformation and propaganda. That we're in a very interesting, the battlefields that are being faced by Israel, and the battlefield that you're fighting on is the information space. Tell me about, especially as a tech-focused person with a deep knowledge of tech, about this battlefield and the asymmetries that are faced in it.
Right. So many years ago, a friend of mine who was the spokesman for the IDF, Peter Lerner. You know Peter?
No.
He's a British guy. He was the spokesman for the IDF for a long time. Really nice guy. You should know him. I'll connect you. Great guy. Anyway, so he called me to his office, I don't know, 8 years ago or something. I don't know how many years ago. And he said to me, how do we win this? How do we win this? It was, on Twitter. How do we win this? And I said to him, well, it depends on your definition of victory. If you're telling me we're going to outnumber them, we'll never outnumber them. If you're looking at the numbers, we will never win this war. But if you define victory, which is how I define victory, as the warriors of truth, right? We stick to the truth even when it's inconvenient, right? When Israel makes a mistake, we own it, right? And so if we're sticking to the truth and our enemies are just lying constantly, from my perspective, we've won, right? And so that's a guiding principle. But, again, the bots and the numbers, they're always going to outnumber us. I strongly believe that the loud, anti-Israel crowd that makes so much noise and blocks roads, they are the minority of the minority. They are just, what they say about a dog with a loud bark, right? They're just barking. They don't have a bite. There's nothing behind them. And we see these videos of like, what river and what sea? I don't know, the Black Sea. Like, they don't know anything, So, I think there is obviously a mismatch numbers-wise. But I think that over the last, decade, we have seen a transformation of public opinion, specifically on social media, toward Israel. And again, those people, I get DMs, I'm sure you do too, I get DMs every day saying, I'm pro-Israel, but I'm afraid to speak out. Every day, So I think that on the one hand, yes, on social media, they outnumber us, but I do think that people appreciate the integrity, the truth. And again, I think when we mess up, owning it is a really important thing. And the lack of, or at least the attempt to not spread disinformation. I try extremely, I'm sure you do, I try extremely. If you looked at the cross-referencing that I did for every time I tweet, you wouldn't even believe it. I will not tweet something, but on the other hand, I also want to be real time. So it's a struggle.
Yeah, of course, it's a massive dilemma.
But I think we're winning this. Long term, I think we are winning this. I think they outnumber us, but I think people can see the difference between the anti-Israel tweets and the pro-Israel tweets. And it's like, these guys are, I'm not going to call them a name, but that's how they talk and that's how they talk. They want peace. They've done infinite, amounts of things for peace over the years, and they just want to fight. They just want dead Jews. They just want to be anti-Semitic. It couldn't be clearer. It's good versus evil.
Do you want peace?
The Jews pray for peace 100 times a day. It's front and center in all of our prayers. Of course I want peace. In fact, I tweeted an hour ago saying one of the things that really upsets me on social media in this war is that when someone follows me and they have Arabic in their bio, I know that 9 out of 10 times they're going to attack me, so I just block them automatically. And it's like, how could I block someone just because of their language? But reality is that 9 out of 10 times they attack me. And it's really sad. Of course I want peace. I want nothing more than peace. But peace doesn't come from weakness. Peace does not come from weakness. You don't make peace from a weak, with no leverage. You make peace with enemies from a place of strength, right? And I'm an observant Jew, so I see everything in the Torah. Literally this week's portion. God says, let my people go. Get the people out of Egypt. Moses comes to Pharaoh. Remember, this is the biggest empire in the world, right? Ancient Egypt. He comes to Pharaoh and says, let my people go. No. Plague after plague after plague. And then finally, literally this week's portion, Pharaoh says to Moses, all right, enough is enough. I can't take this anymore. How many people do you want to leave? And maybe he expected him to say, no, we'll take just a grown man or something. Because, I'm Pharaoh. I'm this massive, you're Moses, you're nobody. How many people do you want to take with you? And Moses is like, no, I'm not playing around with you. We're going to go with our men, with our women, with our kids, with our sheep. We're going all of it. Place of strength, right? That's how you make peace. And that's for sure the case with radical Islam. They only understand strength. And so yes, I want peace, but a real peace, an everlasting peace. Like a peace where not what's going to happen tomorrow or is Hamas, now again, weaponizing Gaza, but a real peace. Yes, everyone wants peace, but not peace where we compromise on our values. That's real peace.
Hillel Fuld. Thank you very much, Hillel, for coming in.
So much.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.